Today's a feeding day. Alright. Gonna have to wait a bit. Let it warm up and shit. Have it attack it. From now on, we'll listen to volume 23, that time I reincarnated as a slime, in the background. Monacio. That's the channel.
The battle had reached its final stage. Everyone felt it. Just as they were thinking of rescuing Milim, that concern became moot. Ivorich had simply tossed Milim aside. Everyone realized that the entity seemingly had no concept of delivering a finishing blow. There was no doubt it was pure evil, but Ivorich's power was immense. It was so overwhelmingly strong that it didn't even consider Milim a threat. This is bad. Honestly, that thing is more than we can handle. That was Benimair's impression. Of course, this wasn't spoken via thought. It was a complaint that had slipped out unintentionally. Thus, only those in the immediate vicinity heard it. It is a golden rule not to instill despair in the troops, so he was careful not to let everyone hear. Even so, his true feelings had spilled out, but it couldn't be helped. For everyone present harbored the exact same sentiment. Furthermore, the strategy they had gone to the trouble of forming was now ruined. They should have been rejoicing that Milim's rescue was successful, but conversely, the fact that they weren't even considered opponents weighed heavily upon them. Even Carrion and the others, who had been prepared to lay down their lives, had mixed feelings as they helped Milim up. The reality was that their desperate resolve meant nothing to Ivorich. To accept that, surely a complaint or two could be forgiven. Well, Milim is safe. Let's just be happy about that, Carrion spoke optimistically. Free nodded, offering agreement that was nothing more than cold comfort. True. She seems conscious and has no major injuries. If she's just exhausted, a good rest will bring her back to normal. Unless Ivorich was defeated, there was no way she could get a proper rest. Even knowing this, they had no choice but to speak cheerfully. If they thought too deeply about it, their spirits would break before the fight even began. To prevent that, they were trying to lift the mood as much as possible. Vildora, too, had started to step forward, only to stop in his tracks. His momentum had been crushed right from the start. The fact that they couldn't rejoice despite the situation ostensibly improving was a testament to the depth of the despair they were all feeling. I'll give that back to you. So, let's play some more. Even Vildora was getting cold feet. However, he had no choice but to step forward. The pressure coming from Valgrind behind him was intense. With an aura that seemed to say, "Are you scared?" perhaps. His option to run away was effectively sealed. Vildora wanted to complain, even though you declared I couldn't win against it. But naturally, he lacked the courage to say it out loud. Dealing with Ivorich was still preferable to doing that. Ryramur, get here quickly. Praying internally, Vildora threw himself into the battle against Ivorich. Meanwhile, Luminous finished healing her with magic and declared that her injuries were no longer an issue. All your wounds are healed, but further combat. It's no problem. I can still fight.
Finally.
Milim replied.
Vicky, it took the rat, you bought it.
His gaze was stern. Do not speak
Look
nonsense.
at that.
Fatigue has accumulated in your body as a backlash from your rampage. A body that has undergone repeated destruction and regeneration is fragile, even if it appears restored. You will not fully recover unless you rest properly and allow your blood to circulate. It was a sharp rebuke, but a valid one. If Milum were to activate her ultimate skill Wrathful King Sentinel, and enter a stampede, she could absorb all matter from the outside, and regenerate her body infinitely. It wouldn't matter if she broke. Fighting recklessly would be no issue. Of course, that would be a major problem in a different sense, but that is a story for another time. The current Milum was not relying on the ultimate skill Wrathful King Sentinel. This meant her energy recovery rate was meager, though given her massive capacity, it was still enormous by general standards. The energy exhausted against Ivorage would not recover so easily. Milum understood this as well. However, she couldn't afford to stand down now. Even among the warriors present, Milum boasted strength in a league of her own. The only ones who compared were Velgrund and Valdor. Even Velgrund had not yet recovered to peak condition. As Luminous noted, while her injuries were healed, her energy density remained depleted by about 40%. She was at her limit, just trying to suppress the aura Ivorage released, working in cooperation with Testarossa and Abair. Incidentally, while Abair had recovered slightly, she was still down about 70% and looked pale. Testarossa had used up over 80% of her energy, yet maintained a cool expression. In this instance, Testarossa, who was utterly exhausted but refused to show it, deserved praise as a model of ladylike conduct. For that reason, Baldor was now facing Ivorage all by himself. He was fighting better than expected, but his style was aimed at buying time. That is the correct choice, Milum thought. If they waited, Rimuru and Guy would join them. If they considered that the real battle started then, there was no need to rush now. There wasn't, but Milum had a bad feeling. Ivorage was playing around. However, if something triggered it to get serious. Milum instinctively sensed that they should defeat it before that happened. As for Baldor, having actually fought Ivorage, he understood something. This guy is learning my techniques. Ivorage was evolving at a terrifying speed. It had gained human form, acquired martial arts, and was now utilizing and developing them. By fighting Milum and Chloe, it seemed to have learned their fighting styles as well. It was now fighting Valdor while applying what it had learned. If he let it grow any further, it might become too difficult to handle, even if he fought alongside Rimuru. Or rather, if it came out that he had allowed the enemy to get stronger, Valdor would undoubtedly be scolded. No good. I must avoid that at all costs. He was tempted to clash with full power just once, but Valdor suppressed the urge. He decided that maintaining the status quo while provoking it as little as possible was the best course of action. Milum believed they should defeat it immediately, while Valdor decided to wait until everyone was assembled. Their opinions were divided, but ultimately, the only viable strategy was maintaining the status quo.
He hasn't
Because it
eaten
was unclear
like
if even a full-powered Draco Nova from Milum could finish
4 weeks.
Ivorage off. Valdor, do you have a technique that could
He's
kill
finally
Milum?
eating, and I'm
Milum,
happy.
having shaken off Luminous's
He was
restraint,
shaky,
asked
I
this
could
as she
tell.
lined up beside Valdor.
You know how many
But he's
ingredients
doing
are in
good.
Palm Wonderful 100% pomegranate juice? I'll give you pomegranate fans a hint. I think you get the point. See what I did there?
I hate to gossip, but everyone was talking about this great dentist, and they were right. Now I can't. Your favorite browser just got better again. Meet the lady.
No. My techniques are vast and varied, but they likely fall short of your Drago Nova. Valdor possessed unparalleled techniques, but in terms of maximum output, they did not match Drago Nova. Valdor was confident, but his self-analysis was accurate. Hearing this, Milum had no choice but to make a bitter decision. Then, as I thought, it seems better not to act carelessly. And so, Valdor and Milum teamed up to take on Ivorage. Despite this, Ivorage looked like it was having fun. Kai ha ha ha. It wasn't just acting composed. It genuinely didn't seem to perceive them as a threat. Valdor stepped in with a straight punch, using it as a distraction, while Milum circled behind. Aiming for the moment Ivorage's body stiffened from Valdor's fist, Milum locked it in a hold. The plan was to restrain it, then capture it using Valdor's Fertile Paradox. However, it didn't work. The moment Valdor tried to activate Fertile Paradox, Ivorage detonated its own magic power. This sent Milum flying. Gah. Valdor hurriedly evaded, but he was punched by Ivorage emerging from the blast, and slammed into solid rock at supersonic speed. The bedrock, thousands of times stronger than concrete, was pulverized into sand. This alone was enough to show the terrifying magnitude of the impact. To send me flying, what humiliation. Ouch, that was rough. This guy is getting used to reading the flow of battle. At this rate, even buying time might become difficult. Even with Milum and Valdor fighting as a team, they were easily brushed aside. They could still fight, but maintaining the status quo was no longer an option. Valgrind, a bear, and Testarossa, who were suppressing Iverage's aura, also grimaced at the pressure of his swelling presence. Moreover, at that very moment, something fell from the sky. It was Dino, with a gaping hole in his chest. Milim was the first to notice. That's Dino. Oh. Vildora nodded. Vildora was actually on good terms with Dino. He had even invited him to his room in the labyrinth to read manga together. So, upon noticing Dino's injury, Vildora's gaze sharpened. There were also 2 women supporting him. Pico and Gracia, was it? His companions are with him, something must have happened. Venimer, who was monitoring the entire battlefield, sensed the 3 of them at almost the same time as Milim and Vildora. Noticing not only Dino's condition but also the panic of Pico and Gracia, he realized something irregular had occurred. Dino was strong. Even Pico and Gracia were powerful enough that they shouldn't lose to some random creatures.
Cool action,
unless their
man.
opponent was Velzard, but he hadn't heard that Dino's
Gonna get
group
so
was
much
heading
views
toward the
on
former
this.
Rosania. Of course, while Dino's group was technically under Benimer's command, they weren't his subordinates. Even if they were slacking off again, he hadn't expected much from them, so it wasn't a problem. However, as something unexpected had happened, that was a different story. Lord Vildor, leave this to us. As he shouted, Benimer moved. He swiftly took them in, protecting Dino's group with a barrier. Vildor turned back to face Iverage. He wanted to challenge it with full power, intending to kill, but if he didn't win, things would get messy. He had vented his stress from the fight against Milim by defeating Takeshi, but now his patience was being tested to the extreme. However, Iverage had the appearance of a beautiful woman, felt some resistance to punching it with full force. In that sense, too, his role here was to put his body on the line to hold Iverage back. I'll do it. But for a job this big, I wouldn't settle for just 3 servings of pudding. It was a scream from his very soul. Prepared to be pummeled, Vildor moved to restrain Iverage. With the support of Pico and Garasha, Dino was taken into protective custody. Luminous's holy magic activated, healing Dino. It was a recovery of incredible speed, worthy of the name God's vehicle. I wanted to sleep more. Idiot. If Luminous wasn't here, you might not have ever woken up. Seriously, I'm so glad you're alive. Gracia shouted in exasperation, while Pico wailed in tears. Dino, who had tried to lighten the mood, reflected that it had been a blunder. So, what happened? Benimer asked point blank. Well, about that. Just as Dino was about to answer, something fell from the sky again. This time, the speed was considerable, and no one could react in time. By the time they realized what had happened, a crater had formed in the earth. An attack. Benimer braced himself, but the situation appeared to be different. When the dust settled, someone was lying in the center of the crater. Why are you here? Benimer observed cautiously. It was Feldway, the overwhelming powerhouse who was supposed to be the mastermind behind everything. He had failed to destroy the sacred tree, was defeated by Diablo, and had vanished. That information had been shared, but there had been no mention of him being this battered. Oh, I thought Feldway was the mastermind. Unbelievable. What happened? Velgrin was confused, and a bear was astonished. Everyone felt a sense of foreboding. Feldway was still alive, but his body had begun to disintegrate. At this rate, he had very little time left before he would vanish completely. Don't tell me, did Ramira do this? Hinata muttered. Although she said it, Hinata herself didn't believe it for a moment. If Ramiro had enough power to overwhelm an enemy like this, he would likely capture them alive to hold them accountable. Even if the ultimate outcome was a death sentence, he would start by making them admit their crimes. Feldway's current condition was, by all appearances, fatal. His body had begun to crumble from the extremities, scattering into particles. As a spiritual life form, there was a possibility of extending his life through reincarnation or by possessing another body, but it appeared Feldway had sustained severe damage to his very core. Hey now, don't tell me you rebelled too. Dino asked as he propped Feldway up. Feldway answered with a self-deprecating sneer. Heck, after wishing so desperately for his resurrection, it's a pathetic story. It was an affirmation. Dino stared at Feldway in shock. Pico and Gracia also looked at him with complicated expressions. However, remembering that this was no time to be idle, Dino looked up at the sky in panic.
Because I'm Rossman, I am ready for it all.
Runway. It's not just a magazine.
It was just past noon. The aftermath of the intense... Before they could even be surprised by the god's resurrection, everyone realized they were in an unthinkable situation. It was only natural that they were shaken, unsure of how to process this. I have one question. Do you know what my brother's objective is? Velgren broke the silence. He said it's the regeneration of the world. He intends to discard the failed creation and create it anew. Dino and Feldway answered simultaneously. I knew it, Velgren nodded. That is a huge problem, Luminous spat out. It wasn't something that could be dismissed with just those words, but it was a situation where that was all one could say. So, what do you all intend to do? The question was meant to confirm everyone's will. Would they obey the Creator God, or would they resist? This was no longer a matter where force could be applied. If one chose to follow the God's will, they could not be stopped. For those without a direct connection, like Benimaru or Hinata, it probably didn't matter if he was a god or whatever. However, for Velgrund and Valdor, he was their brother, and for Bear, he was her creator. These were not relationships that could be easily severed, and it was understandable that they would be conflicted. That said, time was limited. Although Veldanava didn't seem to be moving yet, the time for decision was approaching. Luminous, for one, intended to oppose him without hesitation. She had no intention of letting the world she had cherished and protected be destroyed so easily. Even if the opponent was the Creator God, she was determined to assert herself firmly. As for me, I'll just follow Rimuru-sama. Even without asking, I know he'd say something like, "Don't screw with us, trying to destroy our world." Or something Benimaru said with a wry smile. Hinata nodded at this. He definitely would. Besides, I have no intention of blindly obeying either. Just because he's God doesn't mean it's logical for him to do whatever he pleases. Partly due to her family background, Hinata had complex feelings regarding God. Luminous was an exception, being both her savior and friend. Following Benimaru and Hinata, Testarossa let out a laugh. There is no need to even wonder. We simply obey Rimuru-sama. Testarossa did not waver. To begin with, demons were a naturally occurring race, and had no concept of loyalty to a creator god. They had their likes and dislikes, and while some like Guy had formed personal friendships, there was no obligation involved. They could choose their own path through sheer free will. As such, Testarossa's mind was made up. Carrera and Ultima were likely the same. I'll go with whatever Masayuki decides. Velgrund, being self-centered in nature, always had the same criteria for judgment. She would simply follow the decision of her beloved. Masayuki, suddenly thrown a critical decision, was surprisingly calm. Or rather, he had simply exceeded his mental capacity. He wore a bodhisattva-like smile, emptying his mind. This was a technique Masayuki had acquired to look away from the horrors of the battlefield. Ha, I don't think I want to die just yet, Masayuki answered with eyes that looked like he had attained enlightenment. Masayuki's desire boiled down to that single point. To have the world destroyed by God after coming this far would mean all his efforts were in vain. Even Masayuki thought that was simply not acceptable. Besides, he felt he heard a voice deep within his heart. Has that bastard lost his mind? I gotta punch him and wake him up. It was the will of his past self, presumably Rudra, calling out to Masayuki. Since he had no reason to oppose that opinion, Masayuki decided to honestly agree. With this, Velgrund's course of action was set. If her brother had truly returned and decided to destroy the world, their fate was all but sealed. However, she could still live for her beloved until the very last moment. That was all Velgrund needed. I'll be with you to the end, Masayuki. Yeah, sounds good. I guess I'll try a little harder. Masayuki thought to himself that he wasn't as scared as he expected. The story of God resurrecting was just too grand, which was probably one reason. But more than that, having Velgrund with him was significant. His luck ability was firing on all cylinders, and he felt a sense of satisfaction that if this didn't work, nothing would. It was a feeling akin to resignation, yet Masayuki somehow felt that it would work out somehow. That was probably because... Hello. Good work, everyone. He heard that carefree voice. Having reverted to my slime form in an attempt to take it easy, I teleported to the battlefield accompanied by Guy and Velzard, all while being carried in Diablo's arms. It was harder than Sean and slightly uncomfortable, but the stability was outstanding. Or rather, it scares me that I'm starting to get used to it. As soon as we arrived, I hopped down from Diablo. Simultaneously, I shifted into my human form and offered a greeting. Hey there. Great work, everyone. Greetings are the foundation of everything, after all. It wasn't technically as if I was late, so I didn't need to make excuses. However, joining the fray late when everyone else was already giving it their all felt somewhat uncomfortable. Offering a greeting was useful, if only as a way to gloss over that feeling. Or rather, any composure I had to think about such things vanished the instant I witnessed the disastrous scene. It had become a hell of a situation. Benimaru, situation report. Rimuru-sama, I am so relieved you are safe. I received a quick briefing from Benimaru, his expression turned to pure joy the moment he saw me. In times like these, thought communication is incredibly convenient. So Valdora lost. I have not lost. And Milim got beaten, too.
If your phone has the answers, shouldn't it just, answer?
My brother's always late.
Packages to Rem.
Arby's new meat and 3 box for just $7.99 is a 4-course meal deal. Unlike other value meals, this box won't leave you hungry. Whoa! Can you believe all this food fits in 1 box?
Arby's, we have the meat.
I was not beaten. Valdora yelled back while still fighting Ivorage. Milim, too, immediately jumped up, displaying her sore loser streak. It's good that they seem energetic, but it confirms that Ivorage is truly a problem. I thought only the enemy boss remained, but it turned out to be absurdly strong. That's a common trope in manga. On top of that, we have the resurrection of Veldanava. I didn't need to explain it. Dino and the others seem to have already conveyed Veldanava's presence. I'll take that positively, as it saved me the trouble. The dilemma is what to do about Feldway. I looked down at Feldway, who was collapsed on the ground. By any measure, he was dying. Setting aside the philosophical question of what death means for a spiritual life form, his energy was leaking uncontrollably. Judging by the look of it, he'd run dry in a few hours at most. Kufufufufu, look at you now, Feldway Diablo taunted. Living up to his reputation as a master provocateur, Diablo shows absolutely no mercy to enemies, anytime, anywhere. I was a fool. There was really nothing else to say to that. He genuinely seemed to be reflecting on his actions, but given the scale of the mess he caused, I didn't feel like comforting him. You only realized it now. Good grief, this is exactly why you are so obtuse. Diablo is scathing. Honestly, calling someone obtuse to their face isn't very nice. It's a pretty heavy insult. People might whisper it behind your back, but rarely to your face. But since it's Feldway, no sympathy is needed. Hey now, Diablo. Even if it's true, don't say it like that. Dino tried to admonish him, but his comment was toxic in its own right. I wasn't the only one who thought so. Dino, that's not helping me. Isn't it fine? This guy needs to reflect, and I have a mountain of complaints I want to unload on him too, That's true, but saying it to a dying guy is... Well, yeah. At least if Feldway had installed Lord Veldanava, we'd all be dead meat by now. Pico and Gracia vented their complicated feelings in a similar manner. They seemed to feel the same as Dino, maintaining a somewhat hesitant attitude. A bear seemed to have her own thoughts on the matter, but drew a line and did not join the conversation. It was Ilario, rushing over, who interrupted. I came because I was worried, but is that Feldway? You bastard, why are you dying? He glared at Feldway while saying this. Feldway smiled at Zelario. I wanted to apologize to you, too. My bad. Zelario. At this late stage. I don't have much time left. Feldway laughed self-deprecatingly. Then, reflecting on his past actions, he began to speak as if in confession. I was blind. Believing it was Lord Veldanava's wish, I questioned nothing, and piled one foolish act upon another. I have no way to atone for those sins, but I have one final regret. Dino, Pico, and Gracia. A bear. And Zelario. They listened quietly to the final words of the one who was once their friend. I want to save that person, who continues to lose his way even now. His quiet words expressed a loyalty to his master that had not yet faded. I was impressed by his spirit alone. That said, granting that wish would be difficult. If Veldanava listened to reason, we wouldn't be in this situation. Based on Velsert's story, he seemed driven by dangerous ideology. He is looking down on us from the heavens even now, but there is only one reason he isn't moving. Ivorage is still active. Rather than testing our strength, it seemed he intended to let Ivorage and the others finish things, so he wouldn't have to dirty his own hands. Is that so? Is it different? He doesn't seem wary of us. It doesn't feel like he's enjoying watching us struggle. Is he waiting for something? Unknown, but whatever his aim, we can deal with it. However, don't let my guard down, right? Roger that. Keeping my guard up against Veldanava, I stood before Feldway.
always tell you there's a catch, a compromise, an asterisk. Sprite Zero Sugar? It's different. It's the lemon lime flavored refreshment you want with zero sugar. This is Sprite Zero Sugar. Obey your thirst.
Keeping my guard up against Feldnava, I stood before Feldway. It was impossible for you, right? Do you still intend to challenge Feldnava? Heh, that is my role. Let this foolish body at least be of some use. Saying that, Feldway tried to stand up. But his arm gave way, and he rolled clumsily onto the ground again. He used to be so self-righteous and cautious. Now, he was a miserable shadow of his former self. I didn't intend to sympathize, but I felt a twinge of pity. If I left him like this, he'd die. But could I even save him? It is possible. Oh, I can. In that
Can't wait
case,
to get
I'll
an
worry about the
albino.
details later. They say the enemy of my